Here's a long-term review of that one mod that fixed the Achilles heel on the 2025 KTM 390 Adventure S, the Zedling Rally Suspension. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So in my previous long-term review video of the 2025 KTM 390 Adventure S model, I had mentioned about the biggest issue that I was facing, that is stock suspension. So before we get into this video, let's have a look at that clip. Okay, now let's get into the things that I disliked about this bike. The first thing is the suspension. I feel the suspension is the Achilles heel of this motorcycle. Let me explain. So for context, I had the YSS suspension installed on my Himalayan 411. After making the necessary adjustments and tweaks to it, it was the best thing that I did on my 411 after the aluminum rims. So the main reason I got the S variant over the X was the adjustable suspension and the 21-inch front wheels, more suited for off-road riding. So I thought I'll be able to adjust the stock suspension and get a feel close to the YSS. But boy, I was wrong. Now compared to the YSS suspension on my 411, this suspension used to be very reactive, very harsh, and the dampening was not good enough to my liking. Actually, I blame the YSS suspension for all this because I got spoiled by that suspension. So coming to this suspension, what I felt it was very reactive, highly jerky, and it used to behave very differently at different speeds. Like in slow speeds, it used to behave in a different way, and when you set your settings that matches your style of riding at slow speeds, and then you pick up pace, it behaves in a totally different way. And when you start tweaking to that kind of pace, then slow riding becomes a pain in the ass. So that's what I hated about the stock suspension. Even though you put the maximum dampening in the compression and the rebound, the suspension never used to feel planted at high speeds, and it never gave enough confidence. Hoping to tame the suspension a little bit, I even changed the fork oil to a heavier grade from 5W to 15W fork oil from Liquimoly during the first service itself, but it didn't make much of a difference. Moreover, even though it has 200 mm travel, it used to bottom out very quickly, even in not so technical off-road riding. In jumps and ditches and in big rock sections and all that, it used to bottom out all the time. When riding at speeds above 80-90 km per hour, even a small uneven patch on the road or a small undulation used to jerk the handle violently, and it completely throws you off guard. It used to make me feel so nervous riding at such high speeds on not so good roads. And then only when you slow down, you'll start to get more feedback and more traction and more control. I never had such issues on the YSS suspension on my Himalayan 411. It was very well planted. That suspension had the perfect dampening, and because of that, I started picking up pace more and more off-road, and it gave me so much confidence to tackle terrains that I normally wouldn't do. So coming from that bike to this bike, when I tried to do the same things that I used to do on my Himalayan 411 with the YSS suspension, I felt that this bike was so much jerky, unstable, reacts so much violently and differently at different speeds. I was not at all able to connect with it. I was not at all able to understand the character of it, to tame it, to get used to it and ride it confidently. So even though the engine has a lot of performance to give, the suspension used to quickly cut you off from accessing all that performance that engine has to offer. That's how quickly I used to lose confidence when trying to push my limits and the bike's limits. It was so annoying to me to a point where I thought my bike has some sort of specific problem. So I got it checked multiple times from multiple service center, and everyone told me nothing is wrong, everything is fine only. But I wasn't feeling any connection with the suspension, and I was losing confidence day by day. Then after a lot of trial and error, I came to a setting which was okay enough to be manageable on road and off road at slower pace. Like for example, for my style of riding and my body weight, I had 26 clicks of compression and 16 clicks of rebound on the front, and then the preload in the rear was set to the fourth setting with 14 clicks of rebound. The sag was set to around 31% of the total travel in the rear. With this, I was able to ride the bike at slow speeds in both off-road and on-road terrain, but pick up pace, then the front end completely used to lose its shit and behaves very weirdly, and it wasn't inspiring any confidence at all. And then the worst thing happened to me. While on my way to work on a Sunday morning, I suffered a tank slapper accident. Okay, back to this video. A bit of a story time. Coming back to the tank slapper accident. I was riding on a straight stretch of tarmac uphill. The entire road was inclined uphill at around 90 to 100 kilometers per hour. The tarmac was full of uneven patchwork, and I was constantly accelerating throughout that entire stretch of the road. That is, I kept the throttle open and I was constantly shifting through the gears using the quick shifter. And as I had mentioned in the previous clip, I had set up the suspension to a particular setting where it used to perform decent on slow speeds but continue to perform erratic at high speeds. And at the start of the stretch of the road itself, while I was going through a few of this uneven patchwork, my handle was flickering a bit and I kept ignoring it. That was my biggest mistake, and I kept on accelerating. On one such patchwork, as soon as I crossed it, my handlebar flicked suddenly towards the left, and then it went on to a full-blown tank slapper and went totally out of my control. The handlebar violently slapped a few times, before completely locking towards the right side, and then the bike completely toppled over. I flew over the bike above the console and the windshield and everything, and I straight landed on my head, and then I kept on rolling for a considerable amount of distance before completely coming to a halt. By then, all my clothes were completely torn off. My shoes were on one side, my bag had completely ripped off from my shoulders and landed somewhere else, and I fell very far away from the bike. Luckily, it happened on a Sunday early morning while on my way to work, and because of that, there was no incoming traffic on the road. So luckily, I didn't crash onto somebody else or some other vehicle. From there, few locals came running, and then they helped me get up on my feet, parked the bike by the side of the road, and then put me on an auto, and I went straight to the hospital. From there, what followed was a minor foot surgery, 8 weeks of rest, and then a month of physio and all that before I could start riding again. The bike also suffered major damages, and the total bill came up to somewhere around 48,000 rupees. And it took almost 2 months for it to get repaired from the service center. I think when the bike hit such series of uneven patchwork at such high speeds, the suspension failed to dampen it properly, causing the front wheel to lift off and then lose traction. And as you all know, if the front wheel comes back to corner in the ground at an off angle and gains traction, it will suddenly try to counter-correct itself, and then from there on, it will lead into a vicious cycle of correction and counter-correction, leading to the infamously called death wobble. And I had talked about the stability issue about the KTM 300 Adventure S model in my previous review video, and maybe that angle factor also caused the front to lift off when riding at such high speeds, that too in an uphill incline on uneven terrain. Sadly, there is no solution for this. If you exactly want to know what I'm talking about, please check that review video. I'll leave the link in the I button above. So that's when I decided enough is enough. This is getting way out of hand and it is getting quite dangerous. So I thought either I should sell this bike or find a solution for it. Now in my head, I had the benchmark of YSS suspension and how it feels on my Himalayan 411. And naturally, I searched for the YSS suspension, but sadly till date, that is July 2026. Till date, YSS has not come up with a suspension solution for the newer KTM 300 Adventure S models. The next option was to go for the Explore Pro from KTM itself, but sourcing it from Europe was costing almost around 2 lakhs rupees. Now, those of you who have seen the YSS review video on my channel previously, you would have known that I have used the Zedling suspension on my Himalayan 411 for a short period of time for a particular reason. Now, if you want to know the reason, go check that video, the link in the button above. So then I started searching a solution from Zedling, and I found a Zedling Rally Suspension kit for the new 325 KTM 300 Adventure S model on their website, and I decided to try it out. Now, Zedling is a company based out of Pune specialized in suspensions. As I went through Zedling's website, these are the features that I found on the Zedling Rally Suspension for the 2025 KTM 300 Adventure. The Rally Suspension has a travel of 250 mm both in the front and the rear. The front is rebound and compression adjustable with 20 clicks each. The rear is preload adjustable with a threaded preload adjuster for maximum precision. The rebound on the rear and the preload on the front is factory adjusted. To adjust it according to your liking, they'll ask you to fill up a form when you place the order of suspension. In that form, you have to enter your body weight, your gear weight, your luggage weight, your pillion's weight, and their gear weight if you're riding with a pillion. They'll also ask about your riding style, your intention of usage, the percentage of on-road and off-road usage that you're intending to do, the issues that you're facing with the current stock suspension, the expectation of behavior suspension that you want from the Zedling Rally Suspension, and some additional information that you need to fill up and submit in that form. It's a pretty detailed form, so you should take your time and fill it up. So when you fill this form, please give as accurate as possible measurements of your weight, your luggage weight, gear weight, pillion weight and all that stuff. Because I gave only a rough estimate and I faced an issue which I'll talk about later in the video. So once you place the order, it took almost 2 months for them to prepare suspension and then dispatch to the service center. So they'll manufacture it in Pune and will send it to a service center near you. Now they have authorized service centers in almost all of the major cities in India. So when you place the order, you can select the service center that is nearest to your location. They will give you an option of dispatching the suspension either to your home address or to the address of the service center. I recommend that you give them the option of sending the suspension to the service center so that once it reaches the service center, you can just drop the bike there, get it installed and come back home. It usually only takes about a half a day of work for the service center to install your suspension on your bike based on their availability and their schedule. And once you get it installed, you should ride it around for like 1000 kilometers for the suspension to set in before you make adjustments and fine tune it according to your liking. Few things that are not mentioned in the website is that they use linear springs for the fork instead of the progressive stock springs, which is absolutely fantastic, and I'll tell you why in a short while. They also use a custom graded fork oil, and the seat height goes up about ½ inch. Now once you place the order, they will make a particular serial number for you and for your suspension, and they'll make a WhatsApp group with that serial number. And from there on, all points of communication in terms of requirements, installation, service, and all that will be dealt in that group. Now, I've been using the suspension for the past 8 months now and covered almost 8,000 kilometers with it, which included one northeast trip, many trail rides, monthly dirt track practice sessions, and one amateur off-road race also. Now, here are the pros and cons that I noticed with suspension. Now, small disclaimer, this is not at all a sponsored video. I brought the whole suspension unit with my own money, and Zedling didn't pay me anything or even give me any product free of cost to say what I'm going to say next. The first pro that I noticed with the suspension is the dampening. Now, once the suspension was completely set in over the period of 1000 to 2000 kilometers, and once I tweaked it according to my liking, it started behaving completely opposite to the stock suspension. All that unsteady, jittery, uncontrollable, wavery feeling of the handlebar that I was talking about in the previous video completely went away at slow speeds and almost completely went away at high speeds. On dirt track practice sessions, especially while going over rock beds, I have completely maxed out the rebound dampening. That is the slowest setting on rebound dampening and the fastest setting on the compression. That is, the suspension is very quick to compress while very slow to rebound. So even though theoretically this can lead to suspension stacking where it will stack up when going over a long stretch of rocky terrain and then finally it can bottom out, I have not run into a single instance where the suspension has bottomed out till now. This 250 mm of travel completely soaks up the impact over a long period of time on the rock beds without throwing you off the handlebar while giving you adequate feedback on the handlebar. It's not like the Showa suspension that you have on the Himalayan 450. In my opinion, it sucks while going off-road because even though it absorbs and gives you a plush feeling over rough terrain, it fails to give proper feedback, so you can't judge the terrain to pick up pace and go faster and faster off-road. This, on the other hand, gives the perfect amount of feedback on the handlebar so that you can make quick judgments about the terrain, you can get a feel of it and push yourself to go faster and faster off-road while it does the job of absorbing all the impact and giving you a well-planted feel, stability and control. That's how well balanced and good is the dampening on this suspension. The second main thing I liked about the suspension is the predictability. Now, this is where the goodness of linear springs over the progressive ones come into play. I first got the feel of linear springs on the Y suspension on the Himalayan 411, and after that I've always hated progressive springs on the stock motorcycle. The progressive springs are suitable for majority of the population out there who value comfort over control in a suspension. The variable spring rates do a good job in absorbing small impacts while going slow and major impacts also, and thus give you an overall plush, comfortable feeling. But this becomes a bane when you want to try accelerating and push yourself to go faster and faster over rough terrain. This is where the variable spring rate of the progressive suspension behaves differently at different speeds over different kind of terrain. This actually made going to the track for practice or on a trail ride a matter of concern rather than a matter of enjoyment anymore. I was completely left at the mercy of the suspension to carry me from one place to another than let me have fun riding over it. Now comes the linear springs. The linear springs have only one spring rate, so it behaves almost the same over all kinds of terrain. So even though it feels kind of jittery or not as plush when riding over small undulation at slow speeds, it gives a hell lot of predictability on how the suspension is going to perform over a particular terrain. This predictable nature of suspension reaction makes it a hell lot easier to learn how it performs so that you can get more and more practice and then push yourself more to go faster and faster over off-road terrain. It's so much confidence inspiring to tackle rough terrain and pick up pace every time you want to enjoy riding over such terrain. It greatly helped me in dirt track practice sessions, especially in picking up pace over difficult terrain, as I could predict how the suspension would react over this terrain, and then I can make adjustments on my pace or techniques accordingly so that I can skill up and ride faster and faster over that terrain. This ultimately helped me improve my technique and my speed and my confidence level and get me better at riding. This once again made riding off-road terrain a matter of enjoyment than a matter of concern, because I was able to pick up pace, I was able to skill up, and I was able to ride faster and faster over difficult terrains because the Zedling suspension was giving me enough headroom to pick up pace and skill up and get better at riding. Now the third main pro is the control of the bike. Now the improvement in the dampening and the predictability of the suspension greatly translated to improvement in control of the bike. The rear monoshock also perfectly complements the behavior of the front suspension. This makes the bike feel like a single unit rather than two separate entities joined together by a chassis like how you would experience on the stock suspension. In the stock suspension, I didn't have much issues with the rear monoshock, but the front used to behave very erratically. As a result, the bike used to behave very differently in the front and the rear over rough terrain. It always used to take a toll on me to anticipate and take control over the bike because the front used to behave very differently from the rear in a matter of split seconds when you run over an obstacle. Here with the Zedling Rally, the bike behaves as a single unit. The bike compresses and rebounds as a single unit and not like two different entities joined together. This makes riding over off-road terrain at high speeds much easier to learn, to predict and control. This feeling of increased control over the bike at high speeds over uneven terrain has greatly improved my confidence to pick up pace and go faster and faster off-road. Overall, I'm having way more fun riding off-road with this suspension now. I'm thoroughly enjoying it now. This suspension is perfectly making use of the sharp, agile, lightweight chassis of the 300 Adventure S to its maximum potential. And when I'm riding fast on the highways, I go up on the compression dampening so that the suspension don't keep bouncing around at high speeds with small undulations. And this has greatly improved the stability at high speeds on the highways, at straight stretches of tarmac, and during cornering also, which is otherwise not at all confidence inspiring in the stock suspension. Now the fourth pro of the suspension is the increased travel. You'll get all these advantages that I talked about earlier along with an increased 50 mm of travel also. This has increased the ground clearance also of the bike so that you have so much of confidence to jump over bigger obstacles without the fear of having them bash against your chassis. And all this improved suspension travel and ground clearance comes with only just a minor increase in the seat height. Till now, I've never managed to bottom out the suspension even once. Now the fifth main pro is the customer service. Folks from Zedling is always quick to answer all your queries. The WhatsApp group that they make with your serial number is always open to any doubts that you want to clear regarding anything that ranges from installation to the settings to the troubleshooting and so on. They have detailed instructional videos on how to adjust the preload in the rear and the rebound and the compression in the front. They will even share you their recommendations on the rebound and the compression settings based on how you want the suspension to react and behave while going over different terrains based on your feedback. And if you run into any trouble, they will guide you to fix it, and if necessary, they'll make appointments with the service center that you got it installed from to have it checked on your bike and do the necessary repairs if needed. Their after-sales support takes away a big headache of owning an aftermarket mod and its maintenance. Now coming to the cons of suspension. None of the cons that I'm going to mention are any major concerns. They are not major deal breakers at all. But as you know, I like to nitpick about a few things, and here are a few things that I wish were better on the suspension. The first one is the lack of adjustability. Now this ain't a big deal because the factory setup, which is tailor-made for your weight and your riding style and everything, works perfectly out of the box. But if you're a long-time viewer of the channel, you know how much I like to tinker and experiment and fine-tune things for myself. In that aspect, I wish they had given preload adjustability in the front and rebound adjustability in the rear. Now why I mentioned that when you're giving the measurements, you should give it as accurately as possible is because of this. I underestimated my luggage weight by a factor of 10 kgs when I filled up the form initially. So as soon as I got the suspension installed, I went for the northeast trip. Now during the trip, I realized that in straight stretches of tarmac, on straight highways at high speeds, the front was wobbling a little bit. While on the trip itself, I contacted Zedling and they immediately recognized the issue and they told me I need to crank up the preload in the rear. They provide two C-spanners to adjust the preload in the rear monoshock. One is to unscrew the lock nut and the second is to adjust the threaded preload adjuster. Now I forgot to take both of these C-spanners for my trip. So for the entire northeast trip, I had to be a little bit careful at high speeds, and luckily most of the northeast had twisty, windy roads, small roads where going at a fast pace was not an option. So now as soon as I reached home back to Bangalore, I checked my luggage weight and I found that it was exactly 10 kgs than what I had mentioned in the form. So once I told them the same thing, they told me to increase one whole turn on the preload adjuster. That is, it'll compress the suspension by 1 millimeter, which will increase the preload by a factor of 11.4 kgs. And I did that and the issue was completely gone. I double checked it here with the luggage on and then made sure that it was that particular issue that was causing the front to wobble. And then I went down half a turn on the threaded preload adjuster because for city commute, I use a bag which has around 5 kgs of luggage in it. So half a turn might correspond to 5 or 6 kgs and I have kept it like that. And it works perfect. Now before the next major trip, I can make precise adjustment based on my luggage weight thanks to the threaded preload adjuster on the rear shock. Again, a huge thanks to folks from Zedling for their timely support all throughout. Their quick troubleshooting and support has been immensely helpful. The second con is a fork bends. Now this is not an issue particular to the Zedling Rally Suspension. It happens in many bikes with long travel suspension, especially on the forks. Let me explain what it is. So whenever I go for dirt track practice sessions or trail rides, after 2-3 falls, when I pick up the bike and sit on top of it, and when I look down at the handlebar, you'll realize that the wheel is slightly bent compared to the handlebar. This gets super annoying all the time. It's an easily fixable solution. The most efficient way to fix it is by loosening the bolts on the triple clamps and then pumping the forks 1 or 2 times before tightening the bolts on the triple clamp. That will straighten the forks and perfectly align the handlebar and the wheel. But every time you're going on a trail ride or dirt track practice session, this is not feasible. So the quickest and the easiest way to do it is completely lock the handlebar towards one side and then kick the front wheel till the forks reshape and completely align with the handlebar. Then you can sit on top of the bike and check whether the handlebar is on alignment with the wheel or not, or you can have somebody else check it. You can ask them to see whether the wheel is pointing straight when you have pointed the handlebar straight. If the wheel is pointing towards one direction, then you have to lock the handlebar towards that direction and hit the wheel to a point where it becomes straight again. Initially, I thought it has something to do with the Zedling Rally Suspension, but then one of the rally racers that I met in the dirt school told me that this is a very common issue that happens to them also on many bikes like the Hero Impulse and the X-Pulse Rally Pro versions and all that. So they told me they also do the same thing, that kick the wheel back into shape whenever they fall during competition and races and all that. Since the forks are very long to accommodate the long travel suspension, a slight bend in the fork will become a big deviation in the angle between the handlebar and the wheel. This only happens when you fall down and hit the handlebar to the ground and the handlebar bends with the weight of the bike over it while the wheel is being locked. In every other case, like jumping over hard obstacles and over hard potholes, even on high speeds, it will not cause any issues at all. Only twice in the last 8,000 kilometers of using the suspension, I've had to give it to a mechanic to align the forks. Now, it is not a big deal. It's just a half a day's job and it will not cost you much. But you'll have to get the forks aligned every 6 months at least if you frequently go off-road like trail rides, dirt track practice sessions and all that. This is not particular to any suspension. It's just the nature of long travel suspensions, especially on the front, and you can't do anything about it. You'll get used to it, but it is annoying when it happens. The third con is that the suspension cannot be serviced if you run into any issues by the KTM service center or by any local mechanic that you know, because from what I understand from them, it's a little bit complicated setup. But not to worry about the service, because Zedling throughout the country offers pickup of defunct suspensions or shock, and they will ship it to Pune, repair it, service it, and will send it back to you. So all you have to do is, if you run into any issues, you can drop your bike to the service center that you got it installed from, and then they will arrange pickup and service from the service center, get it to Pune, service it, repair it, and will send it back to the service center so that they can just go to the service center and get it installed back again. And usually they will take a week or so to get the suspension sent, repaired, and send it back to the service center. So I think only for a week you have to drop the bike and keep it there so that they can remove it and get it picked up from Zedling, repair it, and send it back to you, and then fix it again. Now, I've not run into any issues so far, but I've asked Zedling about this, that if in case I run into some issue, what should I do? And that is when they told me that this is the protocol that they follow in case your suspension needs some servicing or repair. And that is actually very reassuring to know that you got the service taken care of in case something happens, even though your local mechanics or the KTM service center won't do anything about it. One more thing to keep in mind is that if you are selling your bike with the Zedling suspension, you have to tell the new owner to contact Zedling, fill up the form again so that they can have it recalibrated to their weight and liking and adjustments. They have to follow the process again. They have to drop the bike back to the service center, send the suspension to Zedling in Pune, have them recalibrated, send it back to them, and they can use it once again. The next con is that it is not a con of the suspension. Now that the bike sits a little taller, the bike has become a little more top heavy. This has made it a little more difficult to maneuver the bike during tight trails or while taking in and out of a parking lot. Now, this is not a major issue. This is not a big deal. You can get used to it, practice it, and get over it. And definitely it is not as bad as the Himalayan 450. And once you install the rally suspension, the stock side stand also will kind of become useless because the bike will lean over a lot like the Himalayan 450. So what you can do is get the side stand of the Adventure R from KTM Service Center and install it on your bike. It costs around 990 rupees only. Now, coming to the cost, the entire suspension, the front and the back, the whole kit costs around 36,000 rupees, which includes the shipping. And installation will cost you around 1,500 rupees. Now, is it a value for money modification? Absolutely 100% yes. For a fraction of prices of all those premium suspensions like the YSS and the Explorer Pro from KTM, you're getting almost 90% of the functionality of those suspensions. And even though the WP Apex 230mm travel suspension that you get from the Enduro R costs around 34,000 rupees. The Zedling Rally is miles apart in terms of all the advantages that I talked about. Now, who is this suspension for? If you are an off-road enthusiast who wants to ride faster and faster off-road, who wants to skill up, who wants to enjoy riding different kinds of off-road terrain, then this suspension is the perfect choice for you. The Zedling Rally Suspension makes use of the precise, lightweight and well-balanced chassis of the 390 Adventure to go faster and faster over a wide variety of terrain. It gives you that confidence to pick up pace because it is more predictable and you will feel in control of the bike, which lets you skill up and pick up pace on off-road. Once during a trail recently, we were going through a flat stretch of dirt road and one of my riding partners was ahead of me and I was trying to catch up to him and I was standing and riding. I was in the third gear and suddenly I noticed that the bike was redlining. I was like, what is happening? Is there something going wrong? And I just looked down to see what's going wrong with the console, and to my surprise I was actually clocking more than 90 kilometers per hour on that flat stretch of dirt. That's how confidence inspiring the Zedling Rally Suspension is. You will feel completely in control of the bike and you'll get nice feedback of the terrain while the suspension does the job of absorbing all the undulations, giving you enough feedback without sacrificing much comfort. I wouldn't even dare to hit such high speeds on the stock 390 Adventurous suspension, especially after the tank slapper incident. But if you are someone who wants to use a bike just for touring purposes, mainly on the highways, and you don't want to have fun enjoying riding off-road, and you want to just get from point A to point B, just travel and see the places around, then this suspension will be an overkill for you. And in fact, this suspension can put you off because it is not very plush and comfortable at slow speeds over small undulations. The Zedling Rally suspension is purpose-built and it serves that one purpose very well. Now, regarding the seat height, yes, the seat height goes up by half an inch. Now, about the seat height and all that stuff, I've in detail talked about it in my previous video. So please go and check that video out. And I don't want to repeat the same thing over and over again. And whatever questions you have about the seat height will not be answered in the comment section below. Now, the final question is, should you get the WP Apex 230mm travel suspension from the Enduro R, or should you get the Zedling Rally suspension? Now, I've tried the WP Apex Enduro R suspension on an Adventure S, and that's how I got motivated to install the Zedling Rally as well. Now, the global spec variant Enduro R's WP Apex, which has 230mm of travel, is far superior than the stock Adventure S or the X suspension in terms of dampening. And it is a little better than the stock S or the X variant in terms of every other aspect. So, in my opinion, owners of Adventure S or the X should consider upgrading the suspension because the stock suspension just sucks in my opinion. So now who should go for the Enduro R suspension and who should go for the Zedling Rally suspension? Now, if you're more into touring and you spend most of the time on tarmac and you want to do mild off-roading, then the global spec Enduro R's WP Apex 230mm travel suspension makes the best choice. It is plush and comfortable and it does a way better job than the stock Adventure S or the X suspension. And because it comes from KTM, you can order it from KTM itself and then you'll get all the service and maintenance from KTM service center itself. So for the majority of the population out there, I think the WP Apex suspension from the Enduro R makes sense and it costs around 34,000 rupees to replace it, which is a straight swap for the existing stock suspension. That suspension is best for comfort than control. But if you want to get into more and more off-road riding, if you want to enjoy riding over different kinds of terrain, if you want to skill up and push yourself more and have a lot of fun while traveling and while touring, you go hunting for all those off-road trails so that you can have fun, then Zedling Rally Suspension is the perfect choice for you. If you have tried any of the suspension, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd love to go through them. That's it for today's video. I hope you guys liked it. See you in the next one. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.